Hold on tight. It's time again for the ride of your life at Capital Ford. And the ride of your life begins now with employee pricing for everyone on new Fords. You pay what Ford employees pay. Employee pricing means buy a new 2025 Ford F-150 for just $599 a month. Or buy a new 2025 Ford Escape plug-in hybrid, only $499 a month during our Ride of Your Life event at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Ladies and gentlemen, from La Casa de los Lobos, the Pit, here at the University of New Mexico, let's get ready to rumble!
Oh, I messed up the triple A. How's everybody doing tonight? My name is Ryan Tamori. Welcome back to another fabulous episode of the Pit Press live. Very timely, I think, show tonight with the topics. Guest coming up, Sam Erlick. He is, I want to make sure I got it right, an assistant professor at Boise State University in the Business Management and Legal Affairs Department. We'll talk to him about the house settlement and everything going on in that world that goes over my head. Nine-ish from down south, the one, the only Nick Copela. Happy to have him back on from Las Cruces Sun News. He will join us to talk some New Mexico State football. Always enjoying getting Nick on. He's great. For Ed Nunez will be joining us for the Nick segment. But to his son, the better looking half, younger half. He's a producer for ProView Networks. He helps us. He's a contributor on the Pit Press, Mr. Nick Nunez. Nick, how you doing tonight?
Ryan, good evening, man. Certainly not the better looking half between my dad and I. My dad was just a presenter at the New Mexico Sports Hall of Fame on Sunday. Saw him in a tuxedo. He's looking good. But I'm good, Ryan. It's house settlement day. It goes into effect. I know the house settlement isn't the sexiest topic. A lot of people don't really want to talk about it or just are, not that interested in it. But the changes are here and they start today. So excited to talk about it more.
It's also Canada Day.
I forgot it's Canada Day. A nice Blue Jays hat, by the way.
Yeah, I had to rep it. You know me, I always make the South Park Simpsons joke. So there you go. All right, before we get to our first guest, the Pit Press Plus is your access pass to the heart and the hustle of the University of New Mexico Athletic Department. With a monthly or yearly subscription, you'll unlock behind-the-scenes stories you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a diehard fan, a stats junkie, or you're here for the spicy locker room gossip, the Pit Press Plus has something for you. Subscribe today. Support local sports journalism. The Albuquerque Journal, Santa Fe, New Mexican. That is a fantastic song. Remember, the Lobos don't settle for the sidelines. $2 a month or $25 for the entire year. Kids seats are only $5. Check out our sale right now. $1.99 a month, $19.99 for the year. It was a Father's Day and now 4th of July sale. All Lobo, no filter. Go to the pitpressnm.com. Stay in the loop with Lobo Sports. Follow the Pit Press for exclusive updates, interviews, and behind the scenes content. Find us on Instagram, X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, Facebook at the Pit Press NM. And we are on TikTok now at the Pit Press. Another installment of Together We Have, probably in the works. Obviously, this has something, today's topic has something to do with it. And a continued partnership with 505 Sports Venture Foundation and Kurt Roth. The virtual series spotlights the heart and hustle behind the University of New Mexico Athletic Department through live streams and podcasts on Wednesdays this summer. Go back and check out the 3 interviews we've done with UNM football general manager Bo Davidson, not Hightower. I caught myself there. Defensive coordinator Spence Nowitzki and offensive coordinator Luke Schleisner. Together, We How extends beyond the field, offering fans an inside look at the stories, voices, and community spirit that drive Lobo athletics. All right, to our first guest of the night. And Nick, I can tell you're probably very excited to have him on. All right. He is an assistant professor for Boise State University in the business management and legal affairs department. He's done extensive research writing and has provided expert commentary on all legal issues involving college athletics, which include the House settlement, eligibility lawsuits, and more. You can follow him on X at Sam C. Erlick. Check him out on his website, sportslitigationtracker.com. Tracks all lawsuits involving college athletics. He has a PhD. He's Dr. Sam Ehrlich. Thank you for joining us on the show tonight. How's the weather in Boise?
It's hot today. It's been real hot. Like I imagine, maybe down there in New Mexico, it's a little bit hotter than what we've been dealing with. But I mean, it hit over 100 today. So it was definitely kind of missing even the harsher Boise winters today.
I am going to. I was just telling you, I've been to Boise. What I do in my day job, half of our team is in Boise, because everybody says Boise. And I'm going there again twice in the fall, late summer and then fall, and I'm looking forward to it. The Albertson Stadium was a bucket list, and I've crossed that off. And before the bolt to the Pac-12, I have to go back. And then I've been to Extra Mile Arena, and this year is probably the year I will make it to the BSU UNM game. I cannot help but see some love for the Swingin' Friars. I am not Canadian. I am not a Blue Jays fan. I love the logo and the hat. I'm a hat connoisseur. I'm a New York Mets fan. Yeah, I'm a New York Mets fan. However, my dad used to have to travel to La Jolla, California, and I grew up watching the Padres. June 6, 1996, I saw Tony Gwynn hit a walk-off home run over the right field line at Qualcomm Stadium. And I've been to many things, done a lot of things sports-wise. That is the moment. I'm going to gather you're a big Padres fan.
I am a big Padres fan. I fell in love with the team when I was in law school down in downtown San Diego. I mean, that team, and I was there during one of the rougher stretches of Padres history. In 2011 to 2014, or roughly thereabouts. And but it was cheap seats, it was beautiful weather, it was baseball, and it was just a few minute walk away from my law school. And boy, that got me through law school. And I've just fallen in love with the team since then. And even rougher, more disappointing years like this one. They're a fun team to follow, and we'll always love when I'm able to get down there to San Diego to see a game in Petco.
Yeah, Petco's is my jam. I saw a lot of games at Qualcomm. I was also there during the 98 season when the Cardinals were in town. We were there like for a week, and Mark McGwire homered on a Tuesday night. We went to the game Wednesday night, did not homer. He homered Thursday night. So we missed him during the home run chase. Now I'm starting to sound like a really old man. But I have to know what the Metropolitans are doing. If you follow lately, it's been, I want to take my head to a brick. The Mets have been really bad. But I love watching the Padres. I'm not sure if I lost Nick there. Oh no, perfect. I will start with this. With the end of baseball, can you tell our listeners, viewership, your background?
Absolutely, I'm happy to do it. So yeah, I went, like I said, I went to law school in San Diego after doing my undergraduate at UMass, and really at UMass, I just fell in love with the idea of sports law, kind of just the way that the law applies to college sports and professional sports, just the way that courts tend to, and even Congress tends to treat sports differently. But the underlying fact of it is it's just really just another business in a lot of ways. But it's a business that we all just have so much nostalgia for and have so much love for. And that really colors the way that the law kind of applies to it as well. So in undergrad, I managed to get an internship with the New York Jets in their football administration department. And I asked them, how can I do what you do? And they said, go to law school. And I never quite did that, or I never quite ended up going back to doing what they did in that department, but went to law school, was an attorney for a little bit after that, and working for a sports agent, realized that, the 9 to 5, the representing players part of things, just not my jam, not for me. And what I really like to do, what I really enjoyed doing, was teaching and researching. So I went back to school and got my PhD at Florida State University, go Noles. And from there, managed to get hired here at Boise State, and I've never looked back. And I had exactly one flight. I came out to Boise State. I came out and saw Boise, and I'm like, yep, this is home. And it has been.
Yeah, boy, I love Boise. I think it's fantastic. Boy, we have a lot of connections now. Did you work in Florham Park?
I did work in Florham Park. I absolutely 100% did at that facility right there. And yeah, it was only a 6-week internship, but that was a really good time.
Very cool. My family, the Padres background, and my family's from New Jersey, and I have a cousin that lives
really?
in Florida. Yeah, and I
grew up in Bridgewater, so.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Uh-oh, Nick, you're in trouble. So my parents are from a small town. Boys. Yeah, I'm the wannabe New Jersey. I'm a New Mexican. But my parents are both from a small town outside New Brunswick, Piscataway, East Brunswick, South River. Oh yeah. And I was having this conversation today with my friend Will Weber as a reporter for the Santa Fe New Mexican. He did not know this. He's a Washington Redskins Commanders fan, and he said Theismann. I said it's Thiesman. So I'm telling this story twice today. My dad went to high school with him, knew him. He took my cousin to prom, and then Joe Thiesman threw the ball to Drew Pearson. So you've got 2 Hall of Famers there. But it's a small world. Yeah, my dad got his degree from his undergrad from Fairleigh Dickinson. So he's passed. But when they beat Purdue 2 years ago, I have his class ring and I have the degree in my house. So I was ecstatic for that. But he's got his master's from Rutgers. Okay, I will stop about that. But yeah, you're a Bridgewater guy. That's awesome.
I am.
So you worked in Florham Park. That was going to be my next question, and then I'll throw it to Nick. But what was it like having an intern with the Jets?
Oh, it was such an amazing experience. It was. Well, it's kind of funny. Like at the time, this was something I'd be able to go back to my friends at EMS and say, just brag about. Like I was in the room when Mark Sanchez signed his rookie deal, and how amazing is that? Not quite as amazing and not quite as much of a brag these days, but it's still just a cool thing. And just being in that facility, getting to spend time with players, eating lunch next to them. Going into, General Manager Mike Tannenbaum or head coach Rick Ryan's offices to deliver some paperwork sometimes. Just a really surreal experience, and just a really, really good way to kick off a career in sports law.
That's very cool. Did you go to any Somerset Patriots games?
It's funny. All the time growing up when I lived in Bridgewater, all the time. My dad was actually knew the Calipers, the owners of the teams, very well. So we managed to go quite a bit.
That is awesome. Hey, I've enjoyed talking to you. I will throw it over to Nick for the law stuff. I was not anticipating that intro. So Nick, I'm sorry. I'm throwing it over to you.
No, Ryan, I'm really glad that you did. We're so thankful to have Sam Erlick join us here on the Pit Press Live. Sam, you've done such extensive coverage of the House settlement case. It's litigation that's been going on for a while. It finally reached its conclusion on June 6th, and then today is the day that all of the changes go into effect. Can you just explain kind of how significant July 1st is for the House settlement case?
Yeah, it's hugely significant. I mean, today is a monumental day in college sports. I don't think it's even that much of an exaggeration to say it's one of the biggest days in college sports history, just because today is the first day that college and universities are able to pay players directly. They're able to compensate players directly, even though they're still saying it's not pay for play. It really is kind of pay for play, and that's a world that we just haven't lived in college sports. You know, we've had this kind of amateurism system, and I mean, since 2021, you know, it's been a little bit different with NIL. It's been kind of leading up to this moment, but we have the ability for college universities to pay their athletes directly. And I think more importantly, and more critically, and one of the bigger question marks moving forward is we do also have controls over that. How, you know, and I think that's where the question marks come in. How exactly are those controls going to function? Whether they're actually going to function, if there is going to be litigation over those controls, I think is an outstanding question of how third-party NIL is going to continue to be kind of enforced and continue to be kind of monitored through this new clearinghouse. But this is the day that really kicks all of that off. We're in the revenue sharing and the revenue sharing cap era of college sports.
Sam, we wanted to ask you about how the House settlement impacts Group of 6 schools like New Mexico, like Boise State, at least for the next year, Mountain West Conference teams. It seems like some of the Group of 6 schools are treated a little differently than the Power 4 in terms of how this settlement's going to impact them as far as how much they can pay players and things like that. Can you speak to some of the differences for Group of 6 schools?
Yeah, and I think ultimately it's important to know, and I think it's pretty obvious just looking at kind of the history of how this all came together. This was a settlement that was exclusively negotiated by the Power 4 conferences. The NCAA as a whole had some role in it, but the Power 4 conferences were really driving the bus in terms of the injunctive relief, in terms of kind of what college sports is going to look like moving forward. The College Sports Commission, this new entity that's serving as the clearinghouse and the enforcement entity for that third-party NIL and for the revenue sharing generally, they're a partnership of the 4 conferences, of the four Power 4 conferences. So again, they are very much driving the bus here. And the settlement is very much crafted with their interest in mind, to a large extent. And I will say, like, it's not like there's any differences in the way the settlement is, just on paper implemented between the Power 4 and the group of 6 schools. But at the same time, I think most, if not all, group of 6 schools are going to struggle to reach that $20.5 million cap. While there's a lot of Power 4 schools that are going to be exceeding that Power 4 cap, even if they're going to be trying to do it under the table. And I think that's where some of the conflict is going to come. But I do think it's an opportunity for, now that we can pay players, I think it, in some ways, an opportunity for the group of 6 teams to maybe stand out a little bit, to maybe help with their recruiting a little bit, since they can maybe focus on, the idea that, hey, you're going to be a bigger fish in this smaller pond, and use that as kind of a recruiting hook as well. Though, we'll definitely have to see how that plays out.
Sam, I wanted to ask you about the revenue sharing piece of it. You talked about the revenue sharing cap, $20.5 million. That's based off a model for Power 4 schools. Wanted to ask you kind of what you think the universe is for Group of 6 schools like Boise State, New Mexico, in terms of a number as what they can revenue share. I think Chris Murray from the Nevada Sports Net reported maybe $5 million for Nevada. We've heard $3 to $5 million is kind of a pot of money for a Group of 6 schools. Have you heard any trends like that?
That's roughly what I'm hearing as well, where I think the schools at kind of the top echelon of the Group of 6 are going to be hitting closer to that $5 to $7 million mark. I imagine, it's not like I've had private conversations with Boise State's athletic department about this, but I imagine they're probably going to be at the top end of that $5 to $7 million, roughly speaking. And I think a lot of schools are going to be kind of trying to hit that mark and really kind of seeing that mark as kind of the mark to hit, at least to be competitive at the top level of the Group of 6. So I think that's where a lot of this is going to start. I think a lot of schools are also going to supplement that with the fact that they can give extra scholarships now. They can give scholarships to every member of the team instead of just kind of an arbitrary limit, with kind of more unlimited roster spots generally. But I think in terms of pure revenue sharing, a lot of it's probably going to come down to about $5 million for the top end schools.
Sam, wanted to ask you about how colleges are now going to pay for this. it's from athletic revenues. Obviously, media rights deals depends on what they can be worth, but if they're worth a lot, that can really up the total pot of media rights revenue. Then you got ticket revenue and fundraising revenue. One of the things that Boise State announced when the House settlement came down, that they're starting the Bags Initiative. Can you explain to fans more what that is and what that does to help fundraise money for Boise State?
Yeah, I think ultimately schools are going to have to be creative, especially at the Group of 6 level where they're not overflowing with money. Like a lot of the power, and I think that's one of the critical differences here, where a lot of the Power 4 schools, they can afford to add a $20.5 million line item to their budgets pretty easily without really having to stretch all that much, without really having to restructure all that much. I mean, you're hearing schools like Texas A&M cutting staff to try to meet it, and some schools are cutting scholarships as well. But ultimately they're able to kind of get to that level without that much stress. But for a lot of Group of 6 schools, and I know Boise State's included in this, they were already stretched pretty thin. So finding new sources of revenue is really key, and that's what Bags is about. That's what Kentucky's doing with Champions Blue. That's what a lot of these entities are doing. A lot of these schools are doing when they're kind of creating, and that's exactly what Bags is. Bags is kind of this new, for-profit entity, that for-profit LLC that Boise State Athletics created in order to kind of generate new revenue opportunities, to explore conversations with private equity, to potentially get some cash infusion into the program in exchange for a percentage of really, as Jeremiah Dickey, our athletic director, has talked about it, new initiatives, new revenue sources that the private equity would help set Boise State up with. And I think that creativity is really what's going to win the day here. I think there's a lot of schools that are responding to this and saying, oh, we have to cut sports, we have to cut programs. And with that leads to conflict, and then that leads to maybe it's a short-term win, but I mean, I don't know if you all saw what happened with Stephen F. Austin University today. They cut their women's bowling, their 2 golf teams, and their women's beach volleyball team, and they got hit with a Title IX lawsuit, which is pretty expensive as well. So there are definitely a lot of athletic departments that are going to handle this very differently. I think the ones that are able to be creative, and I really applaud Boise State for being creative, for saying they're not going to cut sports, for looking externally and looking at these new revenue sources to really supplement what they're doing and be able to create that revenue that way. And the schools that are cutting sports, I just don't think it's going to work out in the long run.
We're speaking with Dr. Sam Erlick from Boise State University. Sam, wanted to switch gears and ask you about revenue sharing contracts. It's likely, or what's happening is universities are entering into agreements with athletes directly, and these are enforceable contracts, so to speak. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what you're seeing from some of the standard terms that may be going into these contracts, and what they're doing for both the university and the athlete?
I'm seeing a lot of variance with that. I haven't seen a whole lot of these contracts, but I've certainly seen reports of them. I've seen the Big Ten standard contract, and it's pretty reasonable. There's a lot of very university friendly terms in there, because I think universities are kind of seeing themselves as a place of leverage, because they do the recruiting, they get the athlete on campus, and then by the time they're actually signing the contract, it's too late to really do anything with it. It's really too late to kind of move on from there, and maybe the athlete's going to be unhappy, but that's something you can, I guess, you can kind of manage moving forward. Maybe I think that's how a lot of these schools see it, because we also saw the Florida State contract, and again, they're my alma mater. They're right up there, and I'm pretty disappointed with that one, because some of those terms are absolutely ridiculous. Because talk about using leverage, talk about relying on your leverage to kind of put your thumb down on the athletes who are part of your program. They're apparently there are terms in there that allow the school to fine athletes $2,500 for losing a pair of cleats, or they treat getting injured or getting sick as a breach of contract, where presumably the athlete would have to pay liquidated damages for it. It's crazy. I think it is, and I think a lot of schools are also. I think on the other hand, a lot of schools are also responding to the transfer portal. They're responding to the movement potential that a lot of these athletes have, and the fact that. Well, I think, as the University of Wisconsin would tell you right now, there's not a whole lot you can do to stop an athlete from moving you if you do have a multi-year deal. We saw Wisconsin file a lawsuit against Miami. Notably, they didn't sue Xavier Lucas, the player involved, because I think they just don't want to seem athlete unfriendly, but they filed this lawsuit against Miami over tampering. And I think that's going to be a really interesting case to follow because they tried to do it. What they saw was the right way. They signed him to a 2-year contract. He left in the middle of it. So, and I think that kind of speaks to where we are. This is not something where we have reserve clauses like we have in professional sports, where if you decide to leave your contract in the middle of it, if you're playing for the Padres, for example, and you say, well, actually, I'd rather play for the Red Sox, so I'm just going to leave in the middle of my deal. You can't do that. And you can't because it's collectively bargained. It's something that Major League Baseball can actually enforce. On the other hand, with the NCAA, with college sports, you just can't enforce it. It's not something you can enforce. So I think universities are definitely trying to manage that the best they can. Yeah,
and one of the things you talked about, Sam, some of the one-sided terms you saw, at least in Florida State's contract. One thing I'm concerned about, how many student athletes do you think are really getting represented at the table when they negotiate into these contracts? I think a lot of the time at the Power 4 schools, they're in markets where there's a lot of sports agents. We're here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I don't know how many sports agents we have here in the Duke City. So how are athletes kind of in a group of 6 mid-major level getting represented? Do you know?
I think it's very few of them. I really do. And I think that's part of, you're seeing at some schools where the schools are actually, taking a role in acting as marketing agents for a lot of these athletes and in finding NIL deals. But I think really, especially at the mid-majors, and I think this is also true at the high majors as well, but you're really only seeing agent representation for a lot of the top level players. Because I think from an agent's perspective, if you're going to be signing an athlete who's only going to get maybe a few $100s in NIL money, it's not really worth your time. And that's something where, again, it's something that contrasts a little bit to professional sports where you have these set minimum salaries that at least guarantee you something. But it's also kind of a similar problem to minor league baseball as well, where they don't get paid all that much either. So, yeah, a lot of these athletes, I mean, again, if you're an agent, what's the incentive to take on a player like that if they're not really going to be making you all that much money? And that kind of leads to, oh, there's my cat. And that kind of leads to, those athletes just not getting the representation that would really help them in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Sticking with revenue sharing contracts, again, we're speaking with Dr. Sam Erlick, professor at Boise State University. Sam, are you seeing that, media outlets are requesting some of these agreements between student athletes and universities in public records requests? And are you seeing any trends in the law as to how universities are responding to those?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because, I mean, revenue sharing contracts, NIL contracts in general, it's kind of this weird little gray area where it's hard to consider it, kind of within the kind of the personnel, human resources exemptions that exist within kind of the FOIA framework in a lot of states. Well, for one, because half college athletes aren't employees and these are not employment agreements. So I think schools are a little bit worried about that, a little bit worried about having to give up these independent contractor arrangements because they're just not covered by state FOIA laws. So we're definitely seeing, some journalists really pick at this, trying to get at these contracts, and I think it's important, just as sunlight is the best disinfectant kind of thing, just my perspective. But I can also understand how a lot of schools would see it as a competitive disadvantage to give up their contracts, to give up what they're doing and how much they're paying particular athletes. So you've also seen a lot of states kind of at the same time pass laws that exempt these contracts from FOIA, and that might be a growing trend, especially if some journalists manage to get their hands on it.
Sam, switching gears a little bit, one thing that fans want to see is they want to see more stability in college sports. People are tired of the one and done, can't get attached to players anymore. One way to do that potentially for schools is to sign athletes to multi-year deals. I know that's kind of a hot topic right now. I think as schools are figuring this out, it's probably 1-year deals for most. But do you see that as possibly a way to stabilize college sports?
The funny thing is I don't. I really don't. I think it's because I think a lot of people have the perception that if you sign a multi-year contract, you're going to be there for multiple years. And hypothetically, that's absolutely true. In a lot of ways, that's absolutely true. And I think, a lot of people have the perception you sign a contract, you agree to terms, and that, that's binding. Your word's binding. And it's a very noble, it's a very important kind of theory to have. Unfortunately, it's not how contract law works here in the United States. We have a concept called efficient breach, where it makes sense. The courts allow it to allow people to breach their contracts, especially in cases, because there are sometimes cases where it just makes more sense to breach the contract and sign a different contract elsewhere. And I think Xavier Lucas there with Wisconsin and Miami is the perfect example there. He was on a 2-year deal. He went through year 1 of it. He decided he was better off in Miami. Miami was offering him, potentially more money. It was a chance to go closer to home. He's from Florida, and he decided to break his contract and go to Miami. And the thing about contracts, and this is true across the board, they really don't mean much unless they're enforced. And right now, schools are just unwilling to enforce these contracts. I mean, Wisconsin and Miami is the first time that we've actually seen litigation over these contracts whatsoever. And maybe this changes now that we have the House settlement, now that we have universities directly involved with this, instead of kind of the weird kind of relationship between universities and collectives, where the collectives were signing them contracts but didn't always have really the clear authorization to go after athletes who are breaching. We saw a little bit of that with Louisville, but they never ended up filing a lawsuit. But also, universities just don't want to see them unfriendly to athletes, like I said before. So I really question how much we're actually going to see litigation, breach of contract litigation over some of these athletes. Even if we have terms in the contract that say you're not allowed to leave unless you pay, a significant amount of money in liquidated damages.
Sam, one of the reasons that there's so many lawsuits, and like I said, people are frustrated with the legal world dominating the headlines in college sports a lot of the time. But one of the reasons that there's so many lawsuits is antitrust law. Anything that the NCAA tries to do, someone argues that it restricts competition, and then we have an antitrust violation. And that's what's driving all these lawsuits is the NCAA needs an antitrust exemption. Can you explain a little bit more to the average college fan what that means?
Yeah, so antitrust law, the basic bare bones kind of explanation of what antitrust law is, and it's an incredibly important concept for college sports for exactly the reasons you described, Nick. I mean, basically every major lawsuit in college sports over the past decade or so has been based around antitrust law, from the O'Bannon case to Alston to House v. NCAA to now the 23 eligibility lawsuits that we've seen, kind of looking for an extra year of eligibility. They've all been based in antitrust law. And antitrust law is the idea that you can't restrict someone's ability to enter into a market. You can't exert a monopoly power or duopoly power or any kind of cartel power to kind of force someone out of a market, to price fix, to do a variety of different things such as restrain economic competition that are anti-competitive. It's really based around the idea that we want a free market. We want a market that's free from artificial restraints, such as keeping certain people out of particular markets, or keeping people from or keeping competitors from actually competing with each other over prices and quality of goods. And the way it's played out in college sports is that, well, there's a labor market here. College athletes are part of this very, very expansive, very, very prolific labor market where, colleges and universities compete for their services. They compete for athlete services. That's the whole recruiting process. And the whole theory is that the whole amateurism system, where college athletes are given a scholarship and some ancillary benefits, and that's it, that's price fixing. That is 100% price fixing. That is setting the price of a college athlete services at a particular sum. And whether you think that's a reasonable sum or not, and I think for a lot of athletes it is, that's irrelevant, because it's price fixing. Even if you're price fixing at a objectively reasonable price across the board, it's still price fixing, and price fixing is a major antitrust issue. So that's what's really led to a lot of these lawsuits, where the O'Bannon lawsuit, for example, was over NIL, was over particularly the video games, where college athletes were being given nothing for the use of their name and likeness. Just based on NCAA rules, college athletes were not able to negotiate for that. They weren't able to get anything. And it turned into an antitrust defeat for the NCAA. Same with Alston over education-related benefits like laptops, internships, that kind of thing. It was fixed at zero. And we're still continuing to see this. The same thing happened with the transfer portal, which was a restraint on competition deemed by West Virginia court. We saw with the restriction on athletes being able to negotiate NIL terms before enrollment in the Tennessee case, and now we're seeing it with the eligibility rules as well, where we have at least 3 athletes so far: Diego Pavia, Nizer Forquellen, and Jed Elad, who have been able to successfully argue that restricting the amount of time an athlete's able to play in college is a restraint on trade as well.
Nick, do you have anything, or you want me to go?
No, I had more, but I was under the impression that you wanted to go. Go ahead.
All right, my bad. Now I forgot the question. Yeah, it was a tragedy. Can you repeat the question? I forgot that. I think it seems like grumblings were schools not prepared for this or prepared for this. Have you heard anything about any power P4 or any mid majors that were or were not prepared for this? Do you have any examples of that?
That's a good question. I think this has been such a long time coming that I think most schools have been prepared for it. I think some schools have been more prepared for it than others, but we've known kind of that this House settlement was coming for over a year now. So I do think that most schools were prepared for it and have been really kind of working on the pipeline for it. I think there's some parts of it that surprised people that happened late, like kind of the thing that they did with the roster limits to appease Judge Wilkin and the objectors to it. But I think ultimately schools have been very prepared for this.
Nick, I got one more. Diego Pavia, it's getting more and more eerie. Well, Nick and I went to St. Pius X High School. He went there for a year. Then he went to NIMI, which is New Mexico Military Institute. And then he went to New Mexico State and made me a lot of money gambling because they were underdogs. I don't know if he's necessary, and I've said this on our show, I don't know if he's necessarily the most gifted quarterback, but damn, he's a gamer. His situation and what he did, what did you take away from that, Sam?
He became the perfect case study for eligibility lawsuits because he's someone who played 2 years in junior college where he was an unknown. Then he played 2 years at New Mexico State where, he was able to raise his profile. He beat Hugh Freeze a couple of times, which I think definitely makes national media and a lot of people out there particularly pleased with him and gives him a higher profile. But still, all respect to New Mexico State, and I have a lot of respect for New Mexico State. It's not quite power 2 level. Then he goes to Vanderbilt for 1 year and upsets Alabama and makes Vanderbilt a national story. And he's the face in national Tennessee. And that becomes such a big thing that, I think it's a reasonable argument for him to make to say, why are my 2 years at New Mexico Military Academy, why are they counting the same as Division I years? Like, for the purpose of, especially now that college athletes can get paid, and now that all this is happening, why does it make sense for junior college years to be treated the same as Division I years, especially Division I SEC years? And he went to court, and the judge agreed with him. And again, he became just the perfect case study because he stood to make he really just exploded his profile over the course of his career, and I think it was a fairly easy thing for the judge to be able to imagine. And we've seen so much chaos with a lot of these eligibility cases, and I think a lot of times it's because the athletes don't have quite the same story that Diego Pavia has. I mean, because again, that was just such a clear case study of why. Going back to the whole antitrust thing, why the kind of the restriction on the amount of years that a college athlete can play in college is something of an artificial restraint, even if it does make sense to tie it to college.
I appreciate that answer. I'll throw it back over to Nick.
Sam, I wanted to shift gears and talk to you about how the roster limits are going to change college athletics. Part of the settlement was that you can put more kids on scholarship, but you have less roster spots. Football's capped at 105, men's and women's basketball both at 15. Are you seeing any trends, particularly for a group of 6 schools, like Mountain West schools like New Mexico and Boise State, certain sports that are going to have athletes that are cut that are going to be no longer allowed to play?
You're seeing a lot of that. You are seeing a whole lot of that, and it really is unfortunate. Just because the reality of the situation, why these roster limits are in place, were to allow schools to save some money to pay in revenue sharing. And And I think even when you had kind of the change to the roster limit rule, where you have this ability to designate certain athletes, have these designated student athletes that don't count towards the cap, which is kind of pitched as a benefit for these athletes who are kind of on the kind of on the cut line. I still think a lot of these athletes are being told that, we're just going to stick with the roster limits. And it really is unfortunate, just because, we have this designated student athlete rule. It's there for a reason, but I don't know. It's just an unfortunate part of the settlement. And it's a part of the settlement that really held up the settlement for so long. Like, I think a lot of people were hearing, the settlement's going to be approved right around the final approval hearing on April 7th. And it took 2 more months after that for it to actually get approved. And the reason was roster limits. The reason was 100% roster limits, because there were hundreds, and I kept track of every single one of them. I read every single one of them. There were hundreds of letters from athletes and their parents just saying, it's not fair for me to get cut over this. I mean, why does it make sense for me to get cut over this? And I feel that. I really do. And the roster limit part of the House Summit is just a really unfortunate part of it.
Sam, how are coaches making the decision as to who's going to get cut, right? Because now you have to tell certain athletes, like, hey, you no longer can participate next season because we have a roster cap and we've determined that you're over the roster cap. I just wonder how coaches are making those decisions as to who's in and who's not. Do you know?
That's a great question. I have no idea. I imagine it's probably different for every school and every situation, for every team and every situation. Just kind of looking at, and the way, I've talked to a few people about this, and a few people on the athletic side about this, and the way they kind of framed it is, well, and not necessarily saying Boise State, maybe that's the implication, just all across the board. And I think a lot of the way a lot of these, athletic, people in athletics are treating it is like, well, these are athletes that were kind of just fringe athletes anyway. They weren't really going to contribute on the roster anyway. They're kind of end of the bench type players, and we need to save a little bit of money. We need to meet that roster limit, even if we can declare them as designated student athletes. It just doesn't make sense for a situation to do that.
Oh, that makes sense. What are schools supposed to do, Sam? Designated student athlete. We've seen that term thrown around. So if a school determines that an athlete is no longer going to participate, then they get the designated student athlete tag. What are universities supposed to do to give student athletes that designation, and what benefit does it do for the student athlete?
Yeah, the deadline for that was today. So I imagine we'll see some lists of who was declared a designated student athlete. But there are two categories of athletes that kind of fit into that criteria. First are athletes who are on a 2024-25 roster, but were told or would have been, if the roster limits had gone into place, untouched, those athletes would have been cut from the program. So those athletes are kind of considered to be designated student athletes in that first camp. The second camp are athletes who are incoming freshmen who were going to be or promised a spot on a 2025-26 roster, but because of the roster limits, we're told that spot was going to be revoked. That spot just didn't exist for them anymore. So those athletes, the combination of those two pools of athletes, are going to go on a list. Each university has the responsibility to collate that list in good faith, submit that list to the NCAA and to the class council, the plaintiff's attorneys in this case, and that list will be published and kind of available for coaches to see. And those designated student athletes will not count towards the roster count. They can be included on rosters without having to worry about the roster limits. And again, whether schools are actually going to take designated student athletes, I've seen a lot of negative on that. I've seen a lot of schools that are saying, well, we're going to designate you as a designated student athlete. We're going to give you that really favored status in a lot of ways, at least hypothetically. We're just not going to be able to continue to carry you on our roster because we're deciding just internally on our own merits to stick to the roster limits on our own. And the problem is when you see a lot of schools doing that and you're not seeing a lot of schools taking designated student athletes, the label becomes pretty meaningless. But I don't know. Hopefully it'll be proven wrong on that.
Sam, we really have appreciated your time tonight talking house settlement again with Dr. Sam Ehrlich with Boise State. Sam, I just have one more question. I feel like I could talk to you about this all day, but really appreciate it. I'll throw it back to Ryan. The last part of the settlement we wanted to talk about was the NIL Go portion. So student athletes who make an NIL deal worth $600 or more that is not directly with the university, but with another third party. If it's $600 or more, they got to submit it on this NIL Go platform. Can you explain a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, I mean, for one, you just nailed it. I mean, you just gave a really accurate summation. Did a lot of my job for me, and because you said it perfectly. I mean, any third-party NIL deal for more than $600 has to be submitted to this clearinghouse. And what the clearinghouse does with it is kind of the interesting part, and I think a part that's going to lead to some controversy, some conflict, and potentially some litigation. So, if you think we're done with all the lawsuits, I apologize in advance. But
sorry, Sam. I just hate to end on that because the lawsuits are the things that people are, having such a hard time with. But sorry, Sam. I just had one more.
Well, actually, I was just gonna finish my thought on that. I apologize, but what the clearinghouse is going to do with that is going to be interesting, because what they're going to be checking for is to see whether the compensation for that NIL package is within a range of reasonable compensation, so fair market value for the services, not for kind of the athlete's particular, pay for play kind of consideration. And they'll also be checking to see whether that deal is for a valid business purpose. So is it actually something that is legitimate, kind of what they're phrasing as real NIL, or is it something where it's just kind of a pretext for pay for play? And yeah, I mean, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And Sam, what if it's a contingent contract? So it's not a contract for a fixed amount of money, but it's, if we can sell this many plates at a restaurant, you get a certain percentage. Who knows what that number is? It could be more than $600. How does that get reported?
That's a really good question. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I would imagine it would have to be reported anyway. I imagine any deal that has the potential of being over $600 would have to be reported. That also leads to another question, which is how many of these deals are actually going to get reported, either because of the confusion over what has to be reported and what doesn't have to be reported when it is a little bit fuzzy, or just athletes saying, you know what, I'm just not going to report this. And, again, we'll have to see. I think a major question moving forward is exactly what kind of power and what kind of enforcement ability the College Sports Commission is going to have. And I think that is the big question for the next few years.
Sam, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Ryan, I'll turn it back to you.
The outlook for Boise State football this year, what are your expectations?
I'm optimistic. I am really, really optimistic. I think we have a very winnable schedule. I think we play a lot of good teams. We play the best of the Mountain West. We play UNLV, we play Fresno, we play UNM. Lot of solid teams. Going to Notre Dame is going to be a tough one. I'll actually be there in Notre Dame. I'm really hoping for a win or at least a close game. We'll see how that happens, because Notre Dame is such a good team and they're at home. But hey, if Northern Illinois could beat them last year, I think Boise State has a good shot. Though we'll see. And also another game we'll be going to the game at USF in Tampa. First week games are always a little bit strange, and especially going from the dryness in Boise to the deep humidity in Tampa, that might be a tough one. But I really think, like, if you were to lay down odds right now, I'd say I'd put my money on 11-1. I'm feeling good.
That USF game is on Thursday at 3:30. That's like the first week one game. It's it's 5:30 Eastern. Yeah, it's 5:30 Eastern, so they could get it on TV.
That'll be a fun one. I'm going to that one, and then going to Tallahassee. Won't be able to go to this game, but Florida State's hosting Alabama that weekend as well. So my friend Liam, another professor at Boise State, another Florida State alum, we're taking the trip together.
No, what I was gonna say is Boise State always seems to get that one. Every now and then. I know they didn't beat Oregon and Penn State last year. I mean, they had Oregon on the ropes. But Sam Erlick, assistant professor of business management and legal affairs from Boise State, we can't thank you enough. Much appreciated.
It's been my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. Nick, I'll get a quick reaction from you. Your thoughts.
Really thankful to Dr. Sam Erlick for joining the show. Ryan, we followed this closely. I follow Sam Erlick on X, and Ryan, you can get his Twitter handle to our listeners. But just really thankful to him. He's an expert in sports legal commentary. He follows this regularly. It's part of his research work as a professor at Boise State. He's got direct experience in the industry. And he's translated that into an academic profile, and he just connects really well with people on X. And so just really thankful, Ryan, that he was willing to come on with us. And thank you for allowing us to talk house settlement. I know it's not the hottest topic.
Yeah, it's really not. It's over my head. And I make those dumb, he logged off. I was hoping maybe he'd listen to me. Look, I say this a million times on the show, and I beat it like the dead horse. I said that really wrong there, but I like the history of stuff that I don't totally get. It boggles my mind. So, and then it's lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. And I think that steers a lot of people away, and it's just like, you just want to watch the game itself. I don't know how you feel about that, Nick, but that's how, I think that's where a lot of people resonate.
Dude, you and I were talking about this, and not a ton of people are covering the house settlement here in New Mexico, and we're fortunate that we've been able to cover it. But Ryan, it's just not a hot topic, man. It's like we were talking about. It's lawsuits in sports. So I 100% agree with you. I hope that we can somewhat educate some Lobo fans about what's going on. I'm certainly not an expert, but that's why we bring on people like Dr. Sam Erlick to talk about the house settlement. He's done extensive research in it. So agree with you, Ryan. Not a hot topic. Happy to play my part in covering it.
No, you're the legal. That's what it is. I looked up lawyer nicknames on Google, and I forgot about legal. It was legal eagle, super lawyer, top notch lawyer, and I was like, there was nothing better than that. I don't know. I'm not going to click that because we didn't go live on Facebook. I don't understand what's going on. I thought that was a very informative conversation, though, man. And I think not only did it well, he and I had a lot in common between the Central New Jersey and Southern California stuff. But I thought it was pretty cool that he was at Boise State, which kind of hits close to home. He's at that level, kind of where UNM, other than football, is at. I don't know if that meant anything to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think he's been at Boise State since 2020. If you follow him on X, Sam C. Erlick, should be able to find him by a search. But
there it is.
Yeah, there it is. There's the Twitter handle right there. His profile picture, I think, has the blue turf Albertson Stadium in the background. So he's just embraced Boise State athletics, and an exciting time, from one Mountain West Conference school, at least for one more year, to another. It's an exciting time for Boise State.
I am going to go to one of the comments very quickly. John Romero, Dr. Erlick, thank you for sharing your vast knowledge on a dynamic, complex topic, fairly new to college sports. Thankfully, we have premier experts like you and Nick to navigate, help explain to us. Notice how he didn't mention me there. I don't know if you have a reaction to that.
Yeah, I'm not an expert. I appreciate the kind words, John. Loyal listener, John Romero. We love you. Thank you so much for the kind words. Certainly not an expert. Dr. Sam Erlick is an expert. You should follow him on X at Sam C. Erlick because he can teach you about this. And yeah, get educated. Just the common fan. Figure out what's changing, how it's going to be different. And let's get behind our university. Let's get behind Lobo Athletics, athletic director Fernando Lobo, our revenue sports, our non-revenue sports, women's track and field, cross country for UNM had a phenomenal year this year, Ryan. So let's just, get behind Lobo Athletics.
Let me read one more comment by John Romero. Ryan, you were rocking it today on Will Weber and James Brown's podcast today. Do echo your glowing comments related to your Pit Press colleagues. Learn new nickname for Ed Nunez, Mayor McCheese. Laugh out loud. Yeah. My aunt called my cousin through marriage, but I refer to them as that. Mayor McCheese once, like 10 years ago, and I'm like, yeah, it's a pretty good nickname, Mayor McCheese. If you haven't had time, I'm not even plugging my own appearance on the New Mexican Sports Den with guys that I do love. And like I said on their show, I'm not here to stroke each other's ego. I like Will. Will's a funny guy. I absolutely love Will. I think Will's a great writer. And James Barone. But if you haven't watched their show, just watch it in general. But do yourself a favor and watch the first 6 minutes with the commissioner of the Pecos League. Yeah, it's it's the best. At Lobo Ronnie Chavez, Nick, what is your gut telling you about the Mountain West Pac mediation?
My gut is telling me that the deadline for them to mediate is July 15th. I was looking at the court docket in that case, and there's an order. Sorry, my dog's barking, but there's an order in there that says that the stay of the case, which means the temporary hold on the case while the parties try to mediate and figure out an agreement, will be lifted by July 15th. So that's 2 weeks. I think we'll hear an answer by then, one way or the other, hopefully before.
I'm going to take a commercial break. I think your dad was going to join us. I don't know where he is. I'm going to answer this question. Jacob's still with us. Jacob just has rough time in the evenings. Neff will be actually in Vegas with us in 2 weeks. I've mentioned it on the show. Rick and I are friends. Well, we go back. He didn't like the direction we were going in, and he left and he started his own show. So I'm being very honest about that. But Neff's still with us, and Neff and I are going to be doing hopefully football picks. And I'm talking to my buddy Troy Rivas, whose name's out there. Talking more football. Yeah, at Lobo Ronnie, what is your gut telling you about the stumbling Mets? They suck. Ass blasted by, I'm sorry I said that. Eric's going to be mad at me. They got their behinds kicked. Sorry, that was the first term that came up. They got destroyed by the Pirates. Outscored 30-4. By the way, the Pirates are on a little bit of a heater, though. They've won 6 in a row. You know who's like won 10 of 11? The Marlins. And that's where I go with this. The Dodgers aren't the only team in the league. By the way, and I'm not Canadian, but the Blue Jays won on Canada Day. How's that, Ronnie? Quick commercial break. I'm going to bring your dad on, Nick. I hope you can stay with us because I think you might have some questions for Nick Coppola. Following us after the break, Nick Coppola from the Las Cruces Sun News. Sorry, I was distracted by Eric telling me not to say what I said about the Mets, but it was true. It was horrid. Like it's so painful. And the Pirates of all teams who are not good. I was talking to Chris Jackson, my buddy who used to cover baseball. He works for KOB. He was like, your season's over now. And he's a Pirates fan. He's from the Pittsburgh. I think he's got roots to the Pittsburgh area. And he's like, once you've gotten swept by the Pirates, your season's over. So, hey, they still were like, they're still 48 and like 36. And the Phillies, that game was postponed tonight. I don't know. You can figure it out. Maybe they need another Grimace night. We'll know. We'll find out. All right, that's enough Met talk. Because they got postponed tonight. And the Dodgers are playing the White Sox. We know what's going to happen there. They're already up like 4-0. All right. Quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Pit Press Live. My name is Ryan Tamori. Just finished a conversation with Sam Erlick, professor at Boise State. Very informative, Nick. So many Nicks and so many Eds and Neds. It drives me crazy. Well, to your dad, because I almost always call your dad Ned when we have Ned James on, and then I call Ned Ed. But he's the voice of the Western New Mexico Mustangs and a Lobo fan since 1970. Mr. Ed Nunez. Ed, how was the New Mexico Sports Hall of Fame over the weekend?
April Lynn Chavez Geisler is her first year as the president. Marty Seiss had been president for a while. Then they had Theo Badella, but he had passed away, and they'd asked Marty to come back. Things were done a little bit different. Our inductees, Steve Loy, Michael Sinclair, Fred Young, Alana, God, what's her last name? I'm trying to get it right, but Alana Nichols, I believe, and Roy Cooper, who passed away in a house fire on April 29th, champion roper, but his family came to represent him, and my wife and I were touched by, I think, every one of those speeches. I was telling my son Alana had tried to do a backflip when she was 17 and broke her back and severed her spinal cord, so turned into an Olympic champion and in a wheelchair. And so amazing stories. I thought it went pretty well. We got a lot of compliments. It was a lot of work. I'll be honest with you. I told you that, Ryan and Nick. I told you so. It was a lot of work, a lot of meetings. I'm glad it's. I don't mean this in a bad way. I think it went really well, and looking forward to next year. It went real well. I think you'd have been impressed with our class, and we'll start again here in a couple of months. Looking forward to next year's class. A lot of great nominees.
Appreciate that insight, Ed. And I don't want to keep our next guest waiting because I think he's been waiting a while now. So my bad on that. But Ed, happy you are joining us. It's a familiar face. You can catch him covering Southern New Mexico high school sports and the New Mexico State Aggies from the Las Cruces Sun News. Mr. Nick Coppola. I've got two guys who have traveled across the pond in the last few weeks. How was the United Kingdom?
Oh, it was really, really fun. Yeah, it was definitely something that I needed to do, just kind of get away for a little bit. So I went to Liverpool, then I went to London, and it was great. I had a really good time in Liverpool. I'm a fan of the soccer team there, so it's great to go see that and see the stadium, see stuff by the river and everything like that. So that was pretty fun. The people there were really friendly as well. Less so in London, but everyone's just got a New York attitude of just we got to get going. But there's so much to do in London, so I had a lot of fun. And also on the way back, I got to see family too, so that was really fun.
Very, very cool. Congratulations. And you're going to have to, I didn't prepare this question and I'm so sorry. Congratulations on the award. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about it? But bottom line, congrats.
Yeah. Thank you. So I won an APSC award, Associate Press Sports Editors, in the 2024 APSC contest for breaking news in Division D, and those divisions go by circulations. So the piece that I won was my investigative piece on Tyler Wright's social media posts. I think that led to a suspension and later firing. And very proud of the work that I put in on that. And I also got a top 5 award for just general beat writing, just for my coverage of the Aggies down here. So that was pretty fun to get recognized, and it was great to go. It was a fun experience.
Remember what I told you, stick to your guns. Look what it did. There you go. We will start. There's a lot going on in Aggie land. And we will start with the news you broke today. And I think Jeff Grammer was on it a little bit, but the credit goes to you. The interim athletic director at New Mexico State has spoken to Fernando Lovo, and there is a possibility of bringing back not one but two, the New Mexico State UNM basketball game. What do you know? And it would be the home and home.
Yeah, so there's the possibility for that coming back is growing stronger. So I sat down with Amber last week in an extended interview, just to talk about the national search coming up for her position and just everything surrounding her acting tenure. And one of the things that she mentioned as wins during her tenure was her recent talks with Fernando Lovo. And then they talked about several things, but one of the things that she says that they talked about was potentially going back to the 2-game model, and playing the Lobos twice a year. So nothing is really set in stone yet. So they just kind of float the possibility of just, hey, maybe we can go back to this. But I mean, that's a big thing, because once the 1-game model kind of came this season, I think a lot of people thought that they were going to really stick to that, or this was the end of the 2-game and things like that. But now that they could be going back to that. And Fernando Lovo wants a little bit more clarity on what the Mountain West schedule is going to look like. Obviously, there's going to be major changes coming to the Mountain West with the incoming and departing teams in 2026. Actually, this time next year, exactly. So that'll need to happen before they come to the table and trying to get 2 games. But the possibility for that is greater today, a lot greater today than it was yesterday or the day before. So definitely something big that they're even talking about it, because I think a lot of people thought that the 1 game was it was set in stone, that they were never going to go back to 2 games. But both ADs seem pretty interested in going back.
I saw some of the Twitter reaction. What does your gut feeling say? Would you say it's a good chance? I know it's in early stages, but would you say there's a strong chance that it is back to 2 games a year?
I'd say there is a good chance. It would depend on a couple factors. One, Amber Burge might not be the New Mexico State athletic director in a few months. So who knows if a new AD is going to come in and be like, oh no, this is not going to happen. But as of now, Amber Burge is the AD. If she remains the AD, that interest is obviously going to remain. And the people that made that agreement, 3 of them aren't there anymore. Of course, Eddie Nunez and Mario Moch are no longer the ADs of UNM and NMSU, and Richard Pitino is at Xavier. And I talked to Jason Hooten about this too at New Mexico State, and he says that whatever the consensus is, whatever the majority opinion is, he's down to do that. And I think there's mutual benefits to it. Obviously, it would be, there's a vested financial interest for both institutions. Obviously, a home game for UNM against NMSU and a home game for NMSU against UNM would obviously be one of the most sellout or close to it. I mean, it'd be a red letter game for both of those teams. And I think the majority of fans, especially over here down south at New Mexico State, want to see New Mexico and New Mexico State play twice again. So I think that the financial interest and the fan interest is going to bring that 2-game model back.
What is the grumblings about? Have you heard anything now that I asked this question? Any move? Any? Is the needle moving about NMSU leaving Conference USA?
I wouldn't bet on it. I think New Mexico State would like to. If the opportunity came for them to join the Mountain West, I think they would absolutely take it, because it would be better financially. It would put them more geographically aligned with where they're at. Obviously they would be in a conference with UNM and a bunch of other Mountain Time Zone and West Coast teams, which would be better for them on travel. But I wouldn't bet on it, just because New Mexico State's financial situation with athletics is pretty well known, and it's definitely in the best interest of a conference to have all your members aligned financially and facilities wise. And for both of those measures, New Mexico State is aligned more with Conference USA teams than they are with Mountain West teams. Not that I don't think New Mexico State would be a bad addition for the Mountain West. I think if that move happened, I think it'd be a great thing for not just New Mexico State, but also for the Mountain West. But I don't think it's going to happen.
Before we delve into football, Ed, Nick, any questions?
Not so much a question, Nick, but I think, of course, a lot older than you. So I remember when New Mexico State played twice. My brother and I's games in the backyard were always against Jimmy Collins and Sam Lacey, the make-believe games we had. And, I'm a Lobo fan. I'm not an Aggie fan, but I think even them beating the Lobos in the pit last year was more of a stab to me. And New Mexico State played great that game. They had a great game plan, and they hit some timely threes. So I think that it's even being discussed. I think my son might have mentioned too that maybe last year, I don't know if you thought that, Nick, or not, that 2 games may have been the old way, and maybe that time was over with. But I'm not surprised, Nick, that they're thinking of doing it again, Nick Coppola, because you mentioned financial, and also the teams in the Mountain West that are leaving. The teams that are going to go to the Pac-12. So, an opponent, UTEP coming in, and UTEP in the New Mexico State, and UTEP in UNM had a long-time rivalry. So I think for financial reasons and fan interest, you'd probably want to see that 2-game series continue. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they go back to it, even if Burge isn't the AD at New Mexico State, that it's even being talked about by Fernando Lobo tells me that there is interest in that. So I would think there's a good chance of that.
Right, and I mean, I don't think it's coming. I don't think you'll see something in like the next couple months or a few months, because obviously they want to see whether the Mountain West is going to stay at 20 games, or whether they're going to go back to 18, or whatever they're going to do when the 10-team basketball league comes around. But yeah, I mean, Ed, I agree with everything you said. I mean, obviously, and I think it. What was I gonna say? I think it will come back, and I think that there's interest. I mean, yeah, the fact that it's even being talked about shows that there's the possibility for that is growing. It'll be a guaranteed bumper fixture on the schedule every single year. Both fan bases, I think, want it. Maybe New Mexico State fans want it a little bit more, but I think New Mexico State fans would like to or New Mexico fans would like playing a rival twice a year. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think there would be interest there for that. And yeah, I just think especially with the changes in the conferences and all that, I think having that guarantee kind of game with New Mexico States, I feel like that'd be a good thing. I don't know. I feel like there'd be just a lot of benefits to it.
You're losing a big rival in San Diego State. That's a big rival. And so you need someone to hate, man, coming in here, and New Mexico State. Lobo fans have always hated the Aggies. They have, although there's a lot of Aggies here in Albuquerque. There are. There's no doubt about that. I'm always reminded that of my Aggie friends. So I think there's a good chance of it. I really do.
Nick, floor is yours.
Yeah, Nick Coppola, nice to have you on again, man. Nice to see you. Why would Aggie fans want to renew the rivalry, Nick? Have you heard anything about why they would be passionate about that?
I think for one, they would love to have New Mexico play in Las Cruces every single season. I think that's a guaranteed game. that everybody wants. The arena, the Pan Am would be full or mostly full every single year for that. And I think New Mexico State always wants to get one over on New Mexico. You saw the fan reaction that NMSU fans had last year when they won the basketball game. And then even when women's basketball swept them 2-0 last season as well. So I think for New Mexico State fans, there's just a lot of buzz and excitement about playing New Mexico, and it would work out in there's a lot more advantages to playing New Mexico than there is to not. And so I just I think fan sentiment's definitely there. And it exists a little bit more on the New Mexico State side than it does on the New Mexico side. But, that's why New Mexico State fans want. And that's why Amber Burge is even talking about it, because she knows that fan sentiment is there. And one of the first things she's told me, like, we want UNM coming here to Las Cruces because that's what our fans deserve. And so, yeah, that's the main reason she's even discussing this with Fernando Lobo, is because of that fan sentiment that exists and that they want to play UNM twice a year.
Yeah, and it's a great revenue generator for both schools, like you were talking about earlier. I mean, it's revenue sharing now. And so these schools need to generate revenue, tickets at the door, concession stands for New Mexico State men's basketball, hopefully football. That's going to bring some revenue. Go ahead, Ryan.
Switching gears to football. I know I had you on right after spring practice, but I think I'll kind of backtrack to last year. What was your, and we've talked about it, but what was your assessment of Tony Sanchez's first full year, obviously at the helm? You broke that story. They had some quarterback issues, but what is your overall assessment?
Yeah, I think he didn't exactly get the best hand. His first year, a lot of that 10-5 team in 2023 went away. They had 30-something transfers walk out the door, and including many of their starting players. So a lot of it was new. Most of the coaching staff was new. So it was just a big transition period at a place that's really hard to win at in football. So, I think, and especially, administrators here who are obviously in charge of his employments, they look at that and, think similarly. But I mean, there are some criticisms that you can make with him, but overall, I think it just came as a result of just a huge transition. Obviously, of course, the transition midseason with offensive coordinators and all the news that was generated about that, and so. But I still think he's very ambitious. He's a very energetic and fiery guy, and you need someone like that in New Mexico State to generate that excitement at a place where winning seasons can be hard to come by, or are hard to come by. So yeah, I mean, this year there's a little bit of transition too, but he's trying to establish a little bit more of his culture, and he was always going to get 2 years. I can't remember many New Mexico State coaches, at least recently, that have been fired after one season or maybe even two. So he was always going to get multiple seasons.
I would imagine it would have had to have taken something incredibly bad off the field to get fired in year one. This is something maybe I didn't ask you last year, but how do you know anything about how his coaching experience at UNLV maybe has helped him, in the last year?
Yeah, well, that's why he got the job, and that's why Mara chose to hire him. It was between him and Nate Dreiling, who's now at Oklahoma, I think. And he went with Tony just because of his experience and the fact that he did it before at UNLV. And even though it wasn't as successful as Tony Sanchez would have liked it to be, I think he only went 20-40 at UNLV. He had that several years experience as a head coach, and at UNLV they also underwent a lot of facility renovations for football, which New Mexico State is doing right now with their locker room and their team facilities. So he's got experience with what New Mexico State is trying to do. And I think it helped him attack, this job, especially, in the transition. Jerry Kill resigned, and within a few days, Tony Sanchez was interviewing for the job and getting hired. And so he's yeah, that's what I got.
That's all good. I think the biggest question, last year was quarterback, and you kind of hit on it during the spring game. But how do they approach that going into 2025?
Yeah, I think they feel a lot better about having a guaranteed starter going into fall camp. Last year it was very neck and neck between Parker Watt and Deuce Hogan, the two quarterbacks that it came down to heading into week one, and they made the decision probably later than they would have wanted to. And even then, Parker Watt definitely wasn't 100%. They made the switch to Santino Mariucci a few games into the season. Probably would have made the switch to Deuce Hogan if he didn't get hurt. And so yeah, now they have stability. Unless he plays really really bad or gets hurt, they have a guy. They have the guy since spring, and they know what they can. Excuse me. And they know what they can build around. They know how to cater their offense to him because they've had several months of preparation to do that and to build things around him. And he's got experience. He started the majority of the games at Montana last year, helped them get to the FCS playoffs. So he's got a lot of pedigree under his belt, which is something that they really like, and something that they really didn't have a lot of last year. Parker Watt was their week one starter, and he was a 1-year JUCO guy as a sophomore. He didn't have a lot of experience. Now they have Logan Fife, who's very experienced, and so that was the main problem for New Mexico State last year, was just their really really bad quarterback play. And you can argue where Logan Fife ranks among Conference USA quarterbacks, whether he's in the top half or the bottom half, but I think he's definitely going to be better than what New Mexico State has, and I think that's going to make a huge difference.
He's probably seems to be locked in at QB1. I mean, what gives the staff confidence in him, and how does he fit into Tony Sanchez's offense?
Yeah, I think he came in there and just he wanted to find a place where he could start. That's why he transferred to New Mexico State, because he was very confident that he would win the job there. And, Tony Sanchez and David Yost, the new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach there, they were impressed with him instantly, just because of the increased skill and ability that they now have there. And, Logan Fife is able to play very fast. If you hear that from David Yost, and David Yost likes to play kind of an up-tempo offense. So he fits what they want to do. And I think they're just impressed with also just his attitude and the fact that he took it on. It was, really came in and almost won the job very instantly, from the moment he got there. And so I think they were just very impressed with how he came in and how he handled himself. And, right after the spring game, Tony Sanchez declared him the starter. He was the guy. He was very, very impressed by him.
Ed, on to you.
Nick, you mentioned that quarterback play. We saw that. It makes a big difference. Diego Pavia came in. Jerry Kill came in. Devin Dampier. New Mexico probably won 3 games because of his quarterback play. And both teams, Jack Lane here hurt during spring camp for New Mexico. There's a big question at quarterback. They don't know who it's going to be. So you mentioned good quarterback play absolutely matters if you have that guy behind center. But I got to ask you this, Coach Kill came in and changed some culture there, two bowl games. And that guy, and Ryan and I always laugh about it. There was a defensive back that made a mistake, and Coach Kill had him by the face mask and just and I had a friend
Finger and face.
Yeah, Devin Dyer played there at defensive tackle, and he transferred to Western. But one of my friends, Pat Dyer, told me that Jerry would cuss out everybody, managers, anybody, didn't matter. So I think the culture changed. It changed there, and then Coach Kill, he moved on, and Coach Sanchez has a big. Changing culture is hard. It doesn't happen in 2 years. And New Mexico is facing the same challenge here. But I wanted to ask you, facilities matter. They do. They matter. And Memorial Stadium has needed a facelift, just like University Stadium needs work too. But you're on your way to, locker rooms, facilities. How important will that be down the line for the Aggie football program?
I think it's going to give them a lot of confidence. I think it's definitely going to give them a boost knowing that they have a better locker room, that they have better meeting rooms, that they have a better training room with, more space for stuff like hydrotherapy and sports medicine and things like that. It's going to really help their especially in between games, helping them recover and get right, And I think the one kind of, and maybe it's a small detail about the new locker room, it's going to allow Tony Sanchez to see everybody at once. In the old locker room, they had lockers right in the middle, so he kind of had to walk around the outside, and maybe some of the players can be able to see him while he talked. Now there's a big space in the middle where Tony Sanchez is going to stand. He's going to be able to talk to everyone, and I think that can make a difference. When you can actually see your head coach in the locker room when he's there and see him talking, and especially on that second floor of what they're going to have, they're going to have multiple pools for hydrotherapy. Their training room is going to be a lot bigger. They're going to have a lot more meeting spaces. Their little conference rooms for positional meetings are going to be a lot nicer. They're going to be a little bit bigger. They have a big conference room that they can show in and bring recruits in. It overlooks the stadium. It's got a nice little window that overlooks the field. It's got big TV. It's where they can have a presentation for recruits. And they have a bigger equipment room as well where they can store more stuff. So it's just going to give them a lot more space to do what they want to do. And so it's going to be a huge boost for them. It's been a little bit rough in spring football because they haven't actually been able to use the locker room, or at least the new one. So they kind of bouncing around. It's part of the reason why they played their spring game in Artesia as well. But when it's done, and everybody expects it to get done for their season opener, it's going to be a big thing. And I think it's something that New Mexico State wanted to do for a while, and they got the money to do just that. And now that it's done and everything's going to be better than it once was, I think it's going to allow them to at least be a little bit more competitive, or try to be a little more competitive now that they have facilities that can compete on a grander stage.
I think facilities matter. At Western New Mexico, we're there. I'm the play-by-play guy, and they play in the Lone Star Conference, and we have guys dressing outside, getting taped outside. There's not a and look, they do the best they can. They do. They need, the athletic director, Scott Noble, who went to New Mexico Highlands, he knew facilities. He understood funding for it. He was very smart. We have an interim AD now, and he's been around Silver City for a long time. He played at basketball at Silver City, and he was a head basketball coach. I think he's going to be okay, but it's not easy. And I think, and I remember the golf coach telling me this at Western, kids like shiny new things. So facilities absolutely matter, and that will help New Mexico State greatly in recruiting. Because, like you said, your coach can't even see the whole team. So facilities, like I said, they matter. Memorial Stadium has needed an upgrade for a long time. University Stadium definitely needs one. And I know Fernando Lobo is on top of that. So I think that's going to help New Mexico State greatly.
Nick, one more before I let you go, and then I'll probably bug you again in August as we gear towards that. We're heading into year 2 under Tony Sanchez at NMSU, especially with the shifting Conference USA landscape. What are the realistic, expectations? I do think their schedule kind of lines up well for them. I mean, it's Bryant. They'll probably get a win, and they get a couple home games. And then I think they open up with Louisiana Tech and then Tennessee at the end of the year in Knoxville. But what are your expectations for him with everything going on in year 2?
I don't think they finished 3-9. Whether they get to a bowl game is another story. So I think probably your ceiling on this team is 6-6, maybe 7-5 if you want to be generous. But I think a realistic prediction, maybe around 4 to 5 wins. And I think if the team even just improves up their win total of 3 last year, I think fans would at least be a little bit satisfied with that. Like, oh, they improved and stuff like that. A bowl game would just make them ecstatic. I think, a 6-6 year, even if they lose the bowl game, I think that would go down for the fan base as a very successful game. And yeah, you're right. Their schedule does kind of work out a little bit in their favor. They do play Western Kentucky, who's one of the better teams, but they avoid Jacksonville State, who won Conference USA last year. And yeah, they get Bryant. They get Tulsa at home. So they're not having to play. They get a good non-conference game at home there. They're going to have to go to Albuquerque to play New Mexico, and they'll get Kennesaw and Missouri State at home too. Kennesaw State they weren't that good last year. Missouri State's going through that transition, so who knows how they're gonna handle that. And they also get Middle Tennessee at home, which is a team that they beat last season, and a team that also had a lot of struggles last season. So they got very good luck in the home games that they got, and New Mexico State was much better at home than they were on the road last year. They were a lot more competitive. They won 2 of their 3 games at home. They never really got blown out at home. They even if they were playing a team that was much better than them, like Western Kentucky, they competed and they fought well at home. And they got some pretty good home games. And so, whether that translates into a bowl game is another situation. But I think you can't expect New Mexico State to improve off their 3-9 season and maybe get 4 wins, maybe get 5 wins.
I'm going to throw it to our Nick Nunez after this question. I didn't realize that Missouri State and Delaware State joined Conference USA. I don't know how I missed that. What am I trying to ask? I mean, how does that? I don't want to sound cliche and use the word landscape again, but how does that change with that being so vast of a conference between New Mexico State all the way to Delaware, and then you hit parts of Florida and obviously kind of the Sun Belt, the Bible Belt? What is your opinion of that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely going to make travel a lot more complicated. They don't have to play a road game at Delaware this season, but that's definitely coming. So that's obviously going to be a big struggle for them. It was for their basketball teams because Liberty and FIU were travel partners, but they're not really close to each other, and so you have to play Liberty on a Thursday and then go to FIU on a Saturday, or it was the reverse. But that takes a toll on you, and it definitely takes a toll on a football team as well when the game is a lot more physical. Their road schedule works a little bit more in their favor this time around. Last year they were having to take trips to Jacksonville State, which required a drive from Cruces to El Paso, then a flight from El Paso to Birmingham, and then a drive from Birmingham to Jacksonville, Alabama. So that alone, just to play a football game, it took a toll, and they had to play FIU as well. They do play Liberty this year on the road, and that's going to be a trip, but their road games mostly work out for them. UTEP's a road game that's right down the road. New Mexico's a road game, but that's also a very short trip. Louisiana Tech isn't the longest trip that you could take. So I think, for that, I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was last year. I think they had some tough road game trips, having to take 2 buses and then a flight in between to go to Jacksonville State I imagine it's not that fun. So they do get a little bit of luck with the home games, get some luck with the road games. But yeah, it'll eventually come to a point where they're going to have to go on the road to Delaware. They're going to have to go on the road to Missouri State, or they'll have to have that conjoined with another road game at FIU, or one of their SEC bye games is one of the East Coast teams. Maybe they'll play South Carolina or Florida down the line, something like that. So yeah, that's definitely something that they have to work at. It's obviously something I've considered writing about. Just what goes into their travel and what goes into trying just to keep the players healthy, to make sure the travel doesn't get fatigued on them. And that's one of the reasons why they would jump at a Mountain West move. Like I said, I don't think that it's going to happen. But yeah, they're definitely not in the best travel situation, being by far the most westernmost team, and that'll become even more so once UTEP leaves.
I did not know that's how they got to Jacksonville State. That sounds horrible. I'm going to throw it over to our Nick.
Nick, the House settlement changes go into effect today. Do you have any information on whether New Mexico State opted into the settlement and whether they will begin revenue sharing?
So they opted in, yes. That was something that I asked Amber the day before Group of 5 schools had the deadline to opt in. And Amber made that decision to opt them in, and so did the rest of Conference USA. I believe the Conference USA Commissioner Judy McLeod said at the basketball tournament that, yeah, all of our schools are going to be going into this. So it's something that not only New Mexico State is doing, but everyone in the conference is doing. And, it's going to require them to be a little more aggressive in fundraising, a little more aggressive in trying to get donors to donate more money, increase their contributions, because there's one more pool of revenue that they're going to have to outsource to. I asked Amber about that when I sat down with her last week. She didn't really want to give specifics on how much money they're going to share or what sports are going to get money. She did seem pretty surprised when I told her that some schools like Texas A&M are only going to share with a few schools, like Texas A&M is only going to share with 6 sports. She seemed pretty surprised to hear that. So that makes me believe that they're going to try to share with every sport rather than just the big ones. But that's going to challenge them to put a little more money to that. And they're exploring new ways to overcome their challenges with their small staff. Like Amber taught me about, what if we incorporate a lot of more AI into our athletic staff? Maybe that'll make us more efficient. Maybe that'll help us increase fan engagement. Maybe that'll help us increase the student athlete experience. And they're also, they gotta give their compliance staff a lot of training, because they've identified that as their kind of middle person to educate coaches, educate players on how to deal with the settlement, or how to report deals with the new clearinghouse, the NIL clearinghouse that comes with the settlements. So there's just it's a big thing for New Mexico State, especially for an institution like New Mexico State that does struggle financially when it comes to athletics. But they do say that their donor engagement is up. I'll have a story coming out tomorrow from that interview, and they tell me that at least 40% of their athletics donors have increased their contributions by more than 10%. That's a good thing, especially with all this uncertainty with who is going to be the AD. So it's a big thing, but one that everyone else is doing. So New Mexico State just has to adapt.
Nick Coppola. I forgot we had 2 Nicks on tonight. Man, you're a very, very good bullpen guy, and I thought it would be good to talk to some New Mexico State and stuff. And I don't mean that like in a negative way. I always appreciate your time, man. I'll have to bug you again here shortly, and then probably some more in-depth football questions as we head into that season, or head into the 2025 season. I always thank you for your time, man.
Yeah, of course. I like that though. I'm Jose Leclerc in the 2023 postseason. Just rely.
You have the ring, and DeGrom looked very good tonight.
He did. I love that. I mean, the Rangers, they had 4 straight extra innings games. So I'm just glad we didn't go to extras again tonight, because that just put a strain on the bullpen, like you were talking about. We beat the Orioles pretty bad tonight. So if we could score 10 runs every game instead of 1, that'd be great.
I had the under last night, and it was the errant throw, and then it went into extras, and it was all downhill from there. I don't know. They're still a fun team to watch, man. I really like, I'm a Garcia guy, and you can't go wrong with Seager or Simeon. I call him C-Man, but you can't go wrong with them. I mean, it's a good top of the lineup, and when they're on, they're on. So, and you've got, a pitcher like Evaldi, and you've got a DeGrom. I mean, there's still, I have faith in Bochy. I wonder if there's a flip that's going to switch. But Nick, thank you very much. Congratulations on the award again, and we'll talk to you probably in a month or so.
Thank you, of course. All
right, Nick Coppola from the Las Cruces Sun News. Always love checking in with him. And now that I've got you guys on, I don't want to, we've been pushing almost an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours, but, and I'll start with your dad, Nick. I'll start with Ed. What are your thoughts on the 2 games a season? Did I say that right? 2 games, the home and away for UNM and NMSU in basketball again. I don't understand. I saw a few certain people on Twitter going at it, and I don't really like to comment on that or politics anymore on this show. It's a basketball state. I would look forward to, don't you want to, if you lost at home, like they didn't get to redeem that loss this year, UNM, they looked horrid in that game. They looked like they didn't give a shit. I'm all for the home and home. I always looked forward to it. We're a basketball state. I would love them to go down there, and the Aggies come up here. You don't have to drive. You get to boo them once a year. Ed, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is like I said to Nick Coppola. I think even more so now with those teams leaving the Mountain West Conference. San Diego State was a big rival of New Mexico. Utah State, maybe not as much, but Boise State. You've got those teams, Colorado State for a long time. And so I think bringing in an old rival for a 2-game series, you need someone to hate, man. Lobo fans were not big fans of San Diego State. That was a pretty intense rivalry. Colorado State for years. So I think it makes sense to me, with new teams coming into Mountain West Conference the next season after these teams one more year to have the gang together, and then it's a new conference. So I think it makes a lot of sense to me to have New Mexico State for a 2-game series. You mentioned that, Ryan, last year at the Pit, New Mexico, losing in overtime. And I think there was a miracle shot made in regulation by New Mexico when he thought that would take momentum into overtime and New Mexico would win, and it didn't happen. So I know for me, that loss, anytime they lose to the Aggies, it takes a little bit more out of me. So I think it makes a lot of sense with the future, of teams, of rivals leaving. So I think New Mexico State coming in for a 2-game series here and then in Las Cruces makes a lot of sense to me.
Nick, your thoughts?
Yeah, we'll look at the tweet from our athletic director, Ryan Fernando Lobo, 7 hours ago today. Kind of gave a public comment on X. He says, thanks for weighing in, and he's tweeting at Lobo Gabe. No decisions have been...
Lobo Gabe.
There you go.
Sorry.
No decisions have been made, and we won't revisit this discussion until after this season. Once the new Mountain West scheduling parameters become clear, we'll always look to enhance scheduling, drive revenue, and keep in-state rivalries strong. And I think Jeff Grammer tweeted out yesterday maybe that Fernando Lobo pretty much told him the same thing. So I think it's a little preliminary right now. Ryan, from a revenue perspective, it's all about money now, right? These universities need to generate revenue so that they can pay these players and be competitive in today's college athletics. An Aggie-UNM rivalry is going to bring money in ticket sales, in concession stands, and every little bit helps. I mean, I think universities in the group of 6, like UNM, like New Mexico State, they're struggling to find money, and putting a home-and-home series is going to sell tickets. I think, Ryan, personally, it would make sense to get them in the Mountain West Conference. I mean, I haven't done the proper research on how competitive New Mexico State has been in Conference USA. But, I think geographically it makes sense to get them in the conference. I understand that, at least for men's basketball, let's say one of us has a bad metric. We turn into a quad 3 or quad 4 loss because neither one of us is that competitive. I understand that piece of it, but I think ultimately from a revenue perspective, it makes sense. And I think the rivalry is a good one. We've had some controversy in the past, unfortunately. But when everybody behaves, it's a really good rivalry. Dad, we were at the Pit this year for the Rio Grande rivalry. Hats off to the Aggies, man. They played better in the second half, and they won. It was a great atmosphere. So I'm not against it. I'm not.
Yeah, I think they should join the Mountain West Conference because it gives you. By the way, hey, chime in on X, YouTube, or Twitter, and I know Neff. Speaking of Jacob Neff, by the way, he's my boss. Longtime listener, first time caller. Question is for Ed. How heavy was the Leaning Tower of Pisa? Can't wait for Vegas in a couple of weeks. Miss chatting with you guys, but we'll be around more often now. So there you go.
Can I answer that question real quick?
Go right ahead.
Real quick about the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Our tour guide, I read something about Benito Mussolini injecting concrete and grout to try to, to fix it, and it didn't work. And her comment to me was right away, I didn't mention anything about Mussolini and Hitler, but she's like, well, Benito Mussolini only met Adolf Hitler once, which I know is not true, but that's her glamorization of her country, though. That's how much she loves Italy, and that she didn't want Mussolini, being linked that much with Hitler, even though they were. But that's my comment about the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It was amazing, and Benito Mussolini trying to inject grout and concrete didn't help. So just a quick comment there.
No, there's no way in the hell that's true. Trust me on that one. There's no way of the Mussolini thing.
Check it out. It's online. It's on Google, man.
Yeah, I'd have to. Well, yeah, I'd have to.
I'm not gonna, I'm not going to make that one up.
Yeah, no, I know. That's not what I'm saying. That you made it up. Feel free to chime in on YouTube and X while we're still going here. If you think NMSU they should play twice a year, or they should join the Mountain West Conference. I forgot what I was going to say before I read Jacob's comment there. I think they should join the conference because at least you have UTEP and New Mexico State because it's geographical. I'm going to really strike home with that. It would take a conference. It would take a non-con away from you. So you would be able to schedule that. And you can also, what more would the rivalry be if you're able to play New Mexico State or New Mexico in the Mountain West Conference championship game in either sport? I think that would be very cool. That would, accelerate the rival, escalate. What am I looking? Put the rivalry into the stratosphere. I just think it would be a good idea. Something we really have been just hammering home the interviews. We really haven't given our opinions on the show lately. Nick, what do you think about Texas State? I gave my opinion on with Will and James on the Santa Fe New Mexican Sports podcast out of the Sports Hub. Yes, by the way, John Romero, please go check out the Pecos League Commissioner interview. I love those guys. They do good work. They're journalists. They've been doing it 20, 30 years. That interview is the best. What do you think about Texas State to the Pac-12? I'm impartial now as I get older. I don't care.
Well, they got their 8th conference member to achieve full membership, what they needed for their media rights deal. They got a pretty good media. Well, look, it looks like the same media rights deal as the Mountain West had. We haven't heard the financial numbers yet. I thought I saw somewhere on X today that could be between 8 and 12 million per school. The Mountain West media deal that's in place now, UNM gets about 3.5 million per year from that. Again, it's all about raising money now. Where's that money going to come from? Hopefully we get a good media rights deal negotiated. So, those are kind of my thoughts, Ryan. Yeah,
we did see the ESPN is in talks with the Mountain West because again, I don't follow that closely. That's not my expertise. If I have any expertise other than watching the Mets lose, Ronnie, where are they going to go? What CBS went to the Pac-12 or was it Fox? It's, I will still watch. I pay for ESPN Plus. I watch it all. College football Saturday in this room in my house is like 3 or 4 screens, and 4 or 5 games on. I'm gonna go to Keno, dude. I still butcher your last name, and I've spoken to you. NMSU needs to be in the Mountain West Conference. Keno, I hope you're doing well, by the way. NMSU needs to be in the Mountain West Conference. It's good for the rivalry of the state and financially benefits both universities. NMSU already has a history playing GCU in basketball in the WAC. That's a very good. I mean, I like that rivalry when it kind of started there when GCU came up. That's a very good point. I agree with that a lot. We're kind of pushing 2 hours here. Ed, any final thoughts on anything?
One quick point of what my son said about the game with New Mexico State. You're looking to, they said that a full parking lot. A couple of years ago, they had to cancel that New Mexico State game, remember? And then Eddie Nunez said that we were looking forward to a full gate, full concession. They had to cancel it because of the gun incident. And so I think with my son saying that, financial considerations, you can almost guarantee they're going to play 2 games a year. That's a given, I think. My son is absolutely right about that.
I appreciate that, Ed, and I'm glad to have you on. And we need to have more shows like this where we're talking because, like I said, it's been predominantly interviews. And it was nice not to be interviewed. It was nice to be asked the questions by Will and James today. Nick, any final thoughts? Hey, good. Thank you for reaching out to Sam Erlick. I thought he was, we had a little bit more in common with the Padres and then Central North New Jersey. But do you have any other final thoughts?
No, Ryan, Sam Ehrlich was fantastic. And yeah, I wanted to plug it because I watched probably the first 20 minutes of your appearance on the Sports Den on the Santa Fe New Mexican with Will Weber, James Baudon. Those guys do a phenomenal job, man. My dad and I have the privilege of covering, state tournaments for high school sports in the state of New Mexico. We always run into James and Will. I relied a lot on Will Weber, his articles about St. Mike's and West Las Vegas and baseball. I'm like, what can I read? Will Weber's got an article. And so it was super helpful. Just really appreciate those guys and the coverage they bring to New Mexico. But no, Ryan, you told your Mike Loxley story. And yeah, man, I enjoyed it. And no, it's a good show. People should tune in.
I almost knocked over my water there. I almost pulled a Mike Francesa with the Diet Coke, if you've ever seen that clip. He knocks over his Diet Coke and it shoots up in front of him and he's got his mic and he's trying to talk to Tony from Bay Ridge or something. Yeah, I don't tell the Mike Loxley story often, but and that was like the condensed version because I didn't want to talk their ear off. Yeah, it's quite the funny story. I'm much older now. I wish I knew now. What is the saying? My God, I wish I knew then what I know now. Because he would have been he would have been fried. We would have. There's no way he would have been the head coach going into 2010. Not berating a student at the University of New Mexico. I know I was a journalist. That's what I said. He would have been gone. I think. It was bad. I mean, the scoreboards were bad. Anywho. I'm tired of talking today. It's been one. Hey, check out the Pit Press Plus. It is your all-access pass to the heart and hustle of the University of New Mexico Athletic Department with a monthly or yearly subscription. You'll unlock behind-the-scenes stories you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a diehard fan, a stats junkie, or just here for the spicy locker room gossip, the Pit Press Plus has something for you. Subscribe today. Support local sports journalism. I've been harping on this show. It is my background. You've got 2 play-by-play guy here. Jeffrey Gordon helps us out. Not that Jeff Gordon. Kudos to him too. And remember, the real Lobos don't settle for sidelines. I'm going to stop the ad there because I just realized something. I'm going to keep you guys for another 5 to 10 minutes. We had the pleasure of having Jason Eck on Friday. I forgot to talk about it. And what I wanted to say was our MO is not doing live stuff. I don't know if we necessarily have the equipment in a room like that. I know the sound was a little bad. It's not my MO. We were there with Spencer Hill for his sunglasses release party, and then I was able to get Jason Eck there. I think Jason Eck is great. Greg Archuleta is now riding for us. I need to get him on. I didn't announce at the beginning because I wanted to get into Sam Erlick. But it was cool. There were a lot of people there, and when Eck walked in, he got he got the everyone's a Lobo, woof, woof, woof. Nick, what did you think about it? I'm sorry. I wanted to get our thoughts about that. I meant to do that earlier.
I had the pleasure of meeting Coach Eck for the first time, man. He's there with his family at Rio Bravo. His son, Jackson Eck, was there, all his kids. And Coach Eck was engaging, man. You know, he went up to people. He went up to multiple tables, you know, where I was sitting, introduced himself, talked to everybody. That's just the kind of guy he is, man. I cannot wait for Lobo football. I'm learning more about the team. Sean Ryder had some really good pieces over the weekend, breaking down offense and defense. I loved Greg Archuleta's piece that we released on Monday, Ryan. I know you're working on stuff as well. You did a great job last week, man, with the offensive coordinator, Luke Schleisner. And forgive me if I pronounced his name wrong.
No, it was correct. I butchered it. Yeah, well, I was struggling with it. But great interview with him. Check it out. Together We Howl on the Pit Press YouTube page. But no, man, I thought it was good. I appreciate that. And Greg Archuleta was there. George Scott was there. It was good talking to Andres Trujillo. I was really shocked when Greg walked in, and I hadn't seen him in so while. And I turned like to my left, and I was like, "Oh shit!" Ed, your thoughts?
You know, I thought I echo the comments my son made. It was good to have Coach Eck out there. You asked for him, and yeah, you know, he in a short turnaround day got back to us and said he'd be out there. He was out there with his family, like my son mentioned. George Scott was out there. There's a couple of Highland friends I saw. So Andres is a very, very good friend. He was out there, so I was able to talk to him. But I got to just tell you, you know, you went on the show today with Will Weber and James Baron, and you talked about the growth of the Pit Press and its inception. And I thought you did a great job. And I think that speaks to more growth, getting out there at Rio Bravo, letting people see us visually. I had a couple of people, you know, that knew me from Highland. What is this? What's the link? So I think there's curiosity in what we're doing, and you going on again on the show, and then you're going to be on Kurt Ross show, and you know, pumping where the origin was, how it started, where it's at now, and where we hope to be. So I think everything, you know, is coming together for the Pit Press Live, and you know, we you know, the high school part that Nick and I offer, the road to the pit, deep in the dugout, high school guests. I think that's a big component of what we do too. So I think everything, all things considered, it was great to see Coach Eck out there with his family, and it was a great event.
Yeah, you know, and I'm guilty. I'll end this show on this. I'm guilty of that. I think us New Mexicans don't like anything new. It like changes the way, and I think we isn't arrogant or egotistical. I think, you know, we've reported stuff. I made a mistake reporting once. It happens. But it is my background. I'm not, you know, I'm trying to make editorial decisions for us to look good, you know, and look right and sound right. And there's a reason. Ed, you were the first person I picked up the call to do the podcast. And then I didn't know Nick was into any of this stuff. And as I said on the show today, once again, not stroking anybody's ego here, Nick should probably be hosting the show, not me going and playing Blame Canada. Or doing things like this.
Miguel Sanchez,
who I haven't seen in some time. Miguel, I hope you're okay.
Who's been?
Yeah. So yeah, I compared us kind of to United, and I'm guilty of it. We don't cover United. I don't understand United. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, that's kind of where I compare it to. But once again, we have started this for fans. I know I'm opinionated, but I'm glass half empty kind of guy. Ronnie, I'm probably the first to tell you how the Mets can get beat on a daily basis. I'm probably the first to tell you how the New York Giants can get beat on a daily basis. I did not think the Knicks were going to beat the Pacers because of Rick Carlisle, and I don't watch the NBA. That's who I am. So when it comes to the Lobos, you know, I changed my opinion like back and forth going in the Marquette game. And I think when I got to Cleveland and I went to the practices and I got to the game, that buzz, I was like, I think they can do it. And, you know, like I said, I tried to call it as I sees it. And I'm probably not everybody's cup of tea. I would think I'm a nice guy when I'm talking sports. I'm probably a different breed. I don't bite or anything. I'm a dad now, and I love. Thank God my son is into sports. He's not into sports, which I love. I think he's a reincarnation of my dad. So it's I'm able to watch Legos and make fart jokes and poop jokes with him. As he gets older, I hope we don't do those anymore. But anyway, I'm going to shut up. Pit Press Plus, check it out. What $1.99 a month, $19.99 for the year. It's a special. We'll keep you posted on Together We Howl. And check out all of our socials at the Pit Press. NM is Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're on TikTok. Check out our YouTube channel. You can go find everything there. Hit like, subscribe. I don't say that enough. But to everybody who commented, excluding Jacob Neff because he's on the show, even though it was a good comment, appreciate everybody. And those that watch that keep us afloat. Again, originally we're trying to inform, have guests. Thursday night, I know I got to plug this. I love the two guys from the Logan Herald Journal, the reporters there that cover USU athletics in high school. Sean Harrison covers the basketball team. Jason Turner, I love, funny guy, covers USU football. We're talking Utah State football on Thursday night. See what else we can do, keeping that Mountain West Conference preview going. We will be in Vegas 2 weeks from tonight. For Eric Malton, my name's Ryan Tamori, Jacob Neff. Nick, thank you for all of your work.
Thank you, Ryan. Glad to be on with you, man.
And that's not any disrespect, Ed. Thanks for joining as always.
No, it's a good time.
All right, everybody. We'll see you Thursday night. Happy Canada Day. And as I always say, don't do anything that I would do.